Welcome to A Girl, a Guy, and a Buffy podcast, Small Bites edition. I'm your co-host, Kate Balzer.
And I'm Charles Swint. So our Small Bites episodes are discussions we had in the main episode that didn't quite fit the overall conversation, but we still wanted to share with you all.
We hope you enjoy these tasty conversational bites. We promise, no angry puppy scars from listening.
Hey there, Kate.
Hey, Charles.
How's it going?
Good. How you doing?
Good. Good. We're about to put the fun in dysfunction. Boom. I've been sitting on that one.
Well done. Well done. Glove clap. Glove
Thank
clap.
you. Thank you. You really shouldn't. I mean, that was low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, it was.
Really, I could do
That's
better.
that's why it was a glove clap. You don't get a full clap. It's just a gentle.
No, but of all of the different types of, family relationships and things like that, I mean, we have not really talked about sort of the dysfunctional families of the villains
Mhm.
in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, right? So there's always this element, there's always sort of an element of a family parallel that goes on
Yeah.
with with all of the big bads, I would say, in some way, shape, or form. We've got the Master and his family versus Buffy and her typical family. We've got
Well, I'd actually almost say it's the Master and his family versus Buffy forming the Scooby Gang
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
in
And
season
then
one.
and then season two, probably not as much in season two, a
No, it's
little bit
kind of the
less.
continuation of the same because you just get more of the Master's line in the fact that Spike and Drusilla show up. So it's kind of
Mhm.
more the same. And that the fact that Willow, Buffy, Xander, Giles are coalescing more
Right.
as a group and bringing other people in with Cordelia and
And
Oz.
yeah. And then season three, we get the mayor and
Right.
Faith,
Versus Buffy and
Buffy and
Giles.
Giles.
Yep.
Season four, we get Adam
hmm And
and
Maggie and Ryder.
Maggie and yeah. And which is interesting then because that's really, I mean, they're all sort of dysfunctional, but then when you look at that trio of Maggie being mother to Adam and Riley and that sort of thing, at a time where really Buffy is losing hers, and I think there's an
hmm
interesting parallel too of Buffy losing her family and being off in college, and we don't see a lot of her family unit, her traditional family unit, where there's this weird family dynamic that again breaks apart.
Yeah. Are you referring to her and her mom, or are you referring to her and Giles and Xander and Willow? Because that's what I think is more
More of Xander, Giles, and
okay.
Willow,
Okay. Yeah.
that the falling apart of all of that.
Right. Agreed.
And then the sort of parallel of the of that group sort of being something and also that falling apart,
Right.
mostly because of murder, but
Being deranged.
yeah. Creating a psychopathic monster that
Yeah.
kills everything, and then we get season five,
hmm
the loss of Joyce.
Yeah, I was gonna say more the comparison to me is Ben and Glory versus Dawn and Buffy, like the
Well,
sibling
yeah.
relationship. That's more where the parallel is.
Yeah, that's where the parallel is, for sure. But I think it's emphasized more because we lose Joyce,
Yes, that's
and
true. Yes.
you see the struggles of Ben and Glory trying to keep those things, keep that relationship, that balance together, the same way that Buffy is trying to keep the relationship stable between her and Dawn after
hmm
losing Joyce. And that being the struggle.
Yeah, and then you have the trio versus Buffy, Willow, and Xander
Yeah.
in season six. Like those are the two parallel groups.
And that becomes I mean, and it feels like it's almost like the toxicity of whatever the big bad is kind of leaks into leaks into their relationships because in season six, all of their relationships are so toxic, and destructive. The behavior is destructive and
Yeah.
everything. And so again, Warren's behavior, the trio's behavior is very destructive. It's very misogynistic. It's very, there's all of those things where like Buffy's relationship with Spike could be viewed as very sort of misogynistic and sort of quote unquote abusive to women. And it's very like sexually charged and sexually violent, which is exactly what Warren
Hmm.
is that person. So you get to see that and what that looks like from a different perspective, and then Willow's downfall and all of that.
Yeah, and there's not really metaphorical comparison for season 7, I would say, because it's not really it's not where the storyline goes. There just isn't
Yeah,
something there. But yeah, so we're kind of exploring, obviously, as we've started this conversation, some of these family or or actual family units on the villain side outside of the whirlwind, as we discussed in the main episode, which was Spike, Drusilla, Darlin, and Jealous. So kind of, taking a step back and looking at Maggie, Riley, and Adam, man, that whole thing was so twisted. That one might creep me out more than any of the other
really.
ones. Yeah, I think partly because Riley was so left out. Like a he was an unwitting participant in this weird twisted family that Maggie was building
Mm,
and the way she saw him. So it'd be one thing if she came in and she was this very cold, analytical, we use science to deal with the supernatural. And that could have been interesting because you have this very science evidence versus experience intuition, which is Buffy as a Slayer. But like it morphs into something way more twisted. And like I said, Riley doesn't really, and really honestly, Adam doesn't either. I mean, you think about she took somebody human. We don't know Adam's story for the most part, other than the little bit we get in Restless. And she added uh robotic and demon parts to him and turned him into, her monster.
right. Who was the man before that?
Right.
Um,
Yeah, there's something just like, and she uses it in this very like maternal, but yet like maybe sexual way because like there's that whole weird thing where she's watching the camera in Riley's room and she's watching Buffy and Riley have
oh,
sex.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, that was like, so what I'm saying is like there were these pieces and you kind of forget about it, but there were elements that were so creepy.
I did block that out.
Yeah.
I honestly did because I forgot that she did that until you just said
Right.
that.
Right. And then
Um,
she tries to have Buffy murdered and make it look like an accident. Like there's
right.
so many levels to like what a messed up.
Well, and it's that thing of like, this is my son is dating this girl and I don't like
Yes.
her. Like, let's get her out of
Yes.
the way.
And he's mine to control, he's mine to do with.
Right.
And yet Riley is so oblivious. Like none of that. He feels that, none of he sees none of that.
Ugh, he's just, ugh.
No, actually in that case I actually have empathy for him. I don't mean that in a like,
No, I agree with you on that. Just in the terms of like Riley does not see anything that's going on
yeah.
around him. He is such a like and again, and this is true, like it's his strength, but it's like his greatest strength is his greatest weakness is that he's
Yeah.
just so naive about
Hmm.
everything
Hmm.
that it's almost frustrating. Like in this
Yeah.
case, it's sad, but in every other case, it's super frustrating because it's
Yeah.
like, dude, I need you to be better than that. I
Yeah.
really
I
need.
think you see that when he comes back in season 6. I feel like his year doing whatever he's been doing in South America and working with this team has opened his eyes. I mean, I think the stuff that happens in Sunnydale does too, but I think him getting away from it
Yeah,
probably helped, gave him that distance. So whether he processed it or was able to see it in a different way, I feel like you get a sense of he has a stronger sense of self and he's not so by the book naive anymore.
yeah, and
But
it's
he
probably
definitely
not
is
so
here.
reliant. Yeah, and so like reliant on everybody for
Yes.
everything.
Yes.
Like I
Yeah.
think even in this case, like he's so like still tied to Maggie's purse, like apron strings
Yeah.
for everything, and a lot
Yeah.
of that too probably was like the drugs. that they were giving him.
True. And then
Probably
there
had
also the
some,
military training. It's very about like you have, following the orders and chain of command. And
right.
although not that Maggie was an officer, she was, as far as I can remember, she was just a scientist running the project.
Yeah.
Um,
But she
Actually,
was,
Riley kind of acted, which he was probably too far down the chain technically to be,
it's a
the
little
lead,
unclear.
yeah, the
Yeah.
lead military person in this project.
There would have been someone on a project like that.
Yeah.
Honestly, there probably should have been like Maggie and someone else
Yeah, I mean, at least I
who
would
would have
think like
been,
a colonel, if not a
yeah,
general.
yeah, who was in charge of the
Yeah,
troops. And then like they would like
right.
co-run that facility and
Yeah,
he would give the orders. But they were like, we'll just cut that person out because
right. We ain't got time for that.
we don't
Not
have
as
time for
interesting.
we cannot afford another person.
We're not Stargate SG-1 to call back to my newest obsession. But yeah, so yeah, I mean it is interesting how they went with a weird twisted family vibes, which actually speaks to the series. I think that and there's I think been some papers and not articles, but like academic articles written on this. I mean, there's a lot you could delve into about family
Mhm.
in this series and some of the, messed up takeaways you could get from the series. As we've, kind of somewhat slowly been exploring parts of that in this season. So in some ways it's not a surprise they went there because it's kind of where the show often delves into
Right.
what is family, what is dysfunctional family. But yeah, there's just something about that. I think it's that whole like Oedipal
It's because she watched him have
complex.
sex. That's, that's
Yeah,
the
there's like
thing.
that elements of that edible complex in there, and you're like, oh, it's just so creepy,
Yeah.
so wrong.
Yeah, that whole relationship is trouble. I mean,
Yeah.
and even Adam like killing Maggie, it just I mean, you can see how,
Hmm.
but you can also see that there is that love there that exists. Like he's broken up. Riley is completely broken up,
Yeah.
over that. Um,
I think he's
Probably more so than like a soldier would be for, a colonel or a commander. I think that, I think she's given him enough like motherly attention
hmm
and affection and praise that he feels that connection between the two of them.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think his is also only the real earnest feelings.
Hmm.
She may think she cares about him, but she would not do that messed up stuff that she
Yeah,
does.
absolutely.
So her, she's
She's
whether she's
manipulating him.
yeah, for sure. She's very much manipulating him. She's her own, I'm not a psychological expert, so I don't want to like put labels on, but she's obviously she has her own twisted sense that goes beyond just being, a logical, evidence-based scientist.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean her like I think
Hmm.
her feeling and her sense of control sort of clouds her judgment. Her
Yeah.
need for control
Yeah.
cloud her judgment to how she's interacting with Riley.
Hmm.
Um,
She her storyline always makes me think of Bones and the Gravedigger storyline. And then also the Palant storyline. They did way too many serial killer storylines on Bones.
I
Um,
loved those though. Those were some of my favorites.
I like the Gravedigger. I could not stand the Palant one. But although I love that actor because I've seen him on other things, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, you're not, you're a good actor because I was like, I like you here. But anyway, those two storylines in particular, if I remember correctly, were they were like the extreme of temperance of Bones, like as if
Right.
she had nothing, if she went to the extreme of being logical and where it crossed over into psychotic
Right.
because it was like there's no thought for humanity, no thought for like you're just solely using logic to its sort of worst intentions. And
Right.
this reminded me of that. She's sort of the same. Like Maggie is taking science and logic to its absolute worst intentions.
Right.
Um, in the supposed name of doing something good, trying
Hmm.
to protect humanity, but
Sort
she
yeah.
went way too far. And, I think that's exemplified in this weird family she tries to build with Riley and Adam.
Yeah, kind of like Zach Addy did with
Yes, yeah, that's another part.
yeah, with Gormagon.
Yes, yes.
Well, that one, yeah. And then we have Ben
Hmm.
and Glory.
Yep. Don't do the joke. Do not do it.
It's real hard not to.
I knew it was, I
It's
could
really
see
hard
it in your
not
brain,
to.
like wanting to come out. And I'm like, no, 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 no.
I was like, I'm not gonna do it,
I'm not gonna
but
let
I
you.
want to, but I don't, but I shouldn't, but I want to.
Okay, now that I said all that, I kind of want you to do it too, because it's like
Well, no, I'm not gonna do it. Um, it's
everyone at
such a
home can do it in your own
It's
head.
such a good joke.
It
And
is.
to me, it's like it's one of the best jokes in the series that is it's so stupid. It's so funny. Same time.
It
And
is.
to me it will never not be funny.
Yeah, no,
I
I
don't know
agree.
why.
I agree.
It's just great. It's one of the best ones in the series.
Yeah,
Um
I mean, they're so fascinating because they like literally share a body.
right. And so like that and they do have sort of that sibling,
Hmm.
you know, sort of dynamic between the two of them, and like even to the like where they have to share each other's clothes and
Hmm.
and keep track of what the other one is, they don't know what the other one is doing, but they're trying to like they have to like track the changes or what's going on, and like but they're trying to have their own lives, their own
Right.
separate
Well, and you
lives.
have Glory who's like sucking all the energy, all the air, takes all the attention as one sibling can, and Ben is just trying to like live his life. And in some ways, Dawn feels the same way. She feels like
Hmm.
Ben, but yet at the same time, once Dawn comes in the picture, because it's like a puzzle piece that doesn't fit until she eventually does, because she's just thrown at them. And now Buffy has this sister, even though she doesn't realize it at first. I think that's obviously part of the tension, because it's like this new being in your life,
Right.
and you have memories of her being old, but of being there the whole time, but she's not really. So that makes like a fascinating dynamic between the two of them. And I think that's, to me, that's what the show was saying in that early tension. That was
Hmm.
why the tension was there. But at the same time, you have Buffy, who feels like all of the energy and attention is being sucked out by her baby sister, who gets to be the baby and doesn't have to be responsible. So it's interesting, like the comparison is, there's very much a parallel in those relationships, and they kind of go back and forth on who's sort of the demanding sibling and who's the poor put upon sibling, which I love.
Right. And it just depends on your point of view. It depends on
Hmm.
who you're talking to at the
Yeah.
time, like, and Ben, and like Ben is trying to do, and also like Ben is trying to do something so like altruistic and noble, like to be a
Hmm.
doctor. Like he could have been anything, like he could have chosen to be anything. And I think, and it's also like kind of unclear too, right, about Ben's existence beforehand. Like, was
Yes.
he a person beforehand that then when Glory got put into this universe, like then they had to share the body? Has he been sharing the body with Glory like their entire life? Like, has that like it's not really
I
clear.
Yeah, you're right. But I do think we get a little info that I think it's they've been sharing their entire life. But I'd have to go back and double check that, because that piece of info has been a while.
Yeah, it feels it's a little muddied to me again, like
Hmm.
in
No,
some
I
of the
agree.
and like in this great device that they have, which is great, but it is a little unclear of like, and how does that work? So like he's a child and like she grew up as a little demon child, and
Oh, that's a good point. They're
like
flipping back and
they're
forth.
flipping back and forth and doing all of this, and he's in med school, or did but then it was like, but then she's chasing the monks down and she's doing all of this stuff. So how is he a doc? So there's some holes in the story, I guess is
Yeah,
what
I
I'm
think the
saying.
thing the only way to make it make sense is you have to assume she's, I don't know why she had to be like, in order to come forth and be contained, she had to be put in the like body of somebody else. But I think the only way to make it somewhat make sense without them having laid that out is she must have been suppressed until a certain point.
Right. At some
And
point
then
she
as it got
emerged.
closer to the date where she could do this, um,
Mm,
where she could use the key to get home, because it was a very specific, alignment of stars, planets, whatever, astral alignment, that she must have come out. Because there's no way, like, it makes absolute no sense that he could like exist, go to college, med school, internship, when he's constantly flipping back and forth.
right.
Like it isn't feasible unless, I don't know, there's some sort of like another spell put on him, but then they would have told us that, that
Yeah.
disguises that or something.
No, that makes sense. That what you're saying makes
Yeah,
way more sense that Glory emerges
right.
as it gets like within like the year or whatever, the year or two, like before the alignment, because she has to, because she goes off to find the monks.
Hmm.
And then, so all of that happens within a certain amount of time. So she
Which,
must have recently just emerged.
yeah, which actually, if you think about it, that not only makes the most sense, but then it parallels Dawn's coming. And so
Right.
poor Ben he's had this whole life, and now Glory is thrust
And now he's got to
into
share this
him.
life.
Right.
Like,
And
yeah.
like Buffy has to with Dawn.
Hmm.
Yeah,
I
that
like
makes it
it.
even more interesting.
Yeah, I headcanon, keeping it.
Totally keeping it.
Keeping it. That's what happened. That's what
Yeah. Which
uh
also I think helps make sense of, because like he's in such a tough position. I mean, and again, he probably is not a bad guy. And, there are good people who do bad things or take the path of least resistance. It doesn't make them like an awful person,
right.
particularly if it's in like one situation. It's not like a constant thing. So he is in this totally like abnormal situation that he has not tried to do anything about it since it came about. He's probably just still trying to like cope with it. I mean,
Hmm.
and maybe they told him, "Oh, there's nothing you can do now that she's, come to the forefront." Because I always kind of wondered about that. Like, why did he not try to do whatever he could to either get her out, suppress her, that sort of thing?
Right.
I mean, again, we wouldn't have season 5 if he did that. But even if he mentioned the fact that he tried and all of it failed because this was meant to be,
Right.
it still would make sense within the storyline and within the universe. So I think that's interesting too, that he was
Yeah.
kind of just really stuck
Hmm.
in the
That this was a
situation.
situation that was thrust upon him,
Hmm.
just like Dawn. Like it was a situation that was thrust upon her. Like her whole
Yeah.
existence was, and Buffy too. Like, and it just,
Hmm.
and it is really sad because I actually just rewatched that episode, and it is sad to watch the monk explaining to Buffy like
Hmm.
we made this thing, we put like, and like her realization that her whole life has been manipulated like that,
Yeah.
um, which is one heck of a powerful spell
Oh, yeah. I mean,
that they do in like 3 seconds. Like them some powerful monks to be able to like manipulate all of reality.
I know. I know. I
Um,
wonder if they had to like save up all their like magical energy or something to do this
they did that
one
spell
big spell.
super quickly though. In like 3 seconds, they were like, all new reality.
I mean, I would say probably Ben and Gloria, especially as we continue to discuss it and think of more things, might be one out of all of these the more interesting dysfunctional
Yeah.
villain families.
And has the most like parallel for
Yes,
sure
yes.
between the two. I think that
Hmm.
that's the strong, like outside of the obvious like Faith Mayer,
Right,
Buffy Giles comparison. I think
right.
Ben Glory, Buffy Dawn
Hmm.
is, a much stronger parallel.
Yep,
Um,
agreed.
yeah, and then when you're looking at the trio, it especially now after that conversation, it doesn't quite hold as strong, but it's still, I mean, it's still we're still dealing with like these ideas of like misogyny, control, mirrored against sort of the lack of control from the Scoobies, like the trio wanting control and needing control and doing everything they can to have it, where the Scoobies are sort of losing control. of everything, of themselves, of what they consider to be morally right, and what they
Mhm.
would normally do, and they're just sort of also, I mean, they say like, oh, life was the big bad in season 6 or whatever, but like in some ways it is a little bit just because I mean, they really were all kind of almost their own worst enemies.
Oh, absolutely. No, it
You
definitely
know,
was. It was sort of a multi-big bad, but yeah, that was definitely the overarching theme for the season. And so true about them all being their own worst enemies, which is actually true on the trio. The more I think about it, actually, I think there's a lot of parallel comparisons to the trio and Buffy, Willow, and Xander because really Willow and Xander were looking for a place to belong when Buffy arrived in Sunnydale.
yeah.
And she gave that to them, which is what Jonathan and Andrew were looking for. But it's an example of to show you how you can diverge on those paths when you have a good leader of your friend group and a bad leader of your friend group.
Yeah.
Um, I think if I keep want to say Giles, sorry, if Jonathan and Andrew had hooked up with somebody else who was a decent person,
Hmm.
they never would have gone down that dark path. I mean, I know I've said this before, but it's so true. I just feel like they're both tofu and they're so easily like flavored by whoever they're
Like,
with.
well, yeah, I mean, had they been a part of the Scoo I mean, we see it with Andrew,
Yeah,
like spending any time with the Scoobies made him a
right.
better person.
Yeah, which
Um,
they delve into even more I know I'm
yeah,
pulling in the comics, but they do in the comics. Like,
yeah,
he becomes a much more fully realized human being
yeah. I mean, he
and
becomes a
grows up.
watcher,
Yeah,
which we see. I mean, we see that in Angel too. Like we see
right,
like the maturity of him, dealing with stuff and becoming a watcher and what that means, and
right.
um,
But still not losing his Andrewness.
yeah, but still being Andrew, just being
Right.
like the best, like the better version of Andrew.
Yeah. Well, any other thoughts on the trio or Ben and Glory or Maggie, Riley, and Adam or dysfunctional villain families in the Buffyverse?
No, I mean, I think that's some really, I like this idea of the parallels between those two. I want to think
Me too.
about that some more.
That wasn't in our like original prep discussion, and I'm like, oh wow, there's a lot of there that I didn't really think
Yeah.
about until we started talking about it.
So I would love to hear other people's thoughts on that too, if they have
Yeah, absolutely.
any any thoughts on
Um,
that. But I'm
I,
gonna explore that train some more.
yeah. Well, it's interesting. I find this too of media that I watch or books I read, but oftentimes more film and television. The things that I like the least are the more interesting stuff to talk about because I can usually like rant on and on about, okay, I didn't like this and this didn't work and da 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 da.
Yes.
So, I think there's a lot of division, more so probably over Maggie Riley Adam and the trio in the fandom, but I think it leads to obviously like we just
More interesting
had more
discussions.
interesting conversations. And there's a lot more there when you realize that when you sort of step back, um, from the series or from what you didn't like and you're like, gosh, they were doing more work than I thought they were. Not work,
Right,
that's not the right, but there was more in depth even than we think there is.
right. And whether that's intentional or, I mean, it feels like it has to be intentional. Um,
Yeah, I'm
for
sure
some
some
of
of it.
it,
Yeah, I'm sure definitely some of it is. And then obviously once a piece is out there, it's up to interpretation. So we may be seeing things that they hadn't intended, but
right,
it comes across to us, which is what any
right.
sort of great work of art.
Jane, hit us up. Miss Espenson, hit us
Yes,
up,
yes.
please. Would love to.
I was like,
Um,
who are you talking about?
True. Goddard.
Yes.
Hit us up. Let us know. We would love to hear your thoughts specifically on some of these things. Please help us out.
Absolutely.
Marty, come on. Miss Noxon. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Small Bites. Let us know your thoughts about the episode by leaving a review or rating us wherever you listen to your podcast.
You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at A Buffy Podcast and email us at abuffypodcast@gmail.com. Thanks so much for listening. Bye.
Bye.